All right, when I first did this video, I kind of made a mistake on this problem, so I'm redoing example 1 and 2 and making this part B of this video. All right, so a secant line intersects the curve g of x. So everything's the same as here, but we're going to use g instead of f. That's it. At 2 points with the x coordinates 5 and 5 plus h. All right, so let's start with this idea. Basically, what is the slope of the secant line? So remember slope, instead of f, I'm just going to put, it's this. Right? And let's just plug it in, okay? So if that's g, what is g of x plus h? And in this situation, obviously the x plus h is going to be 5 plus h. So what would that look like? That's going to be, g is actually the square root of x. So g of x plus h would be the square root of 5 plus h minus the square root. And instead of x, I'm just putting, remember, this is kind of like, I guess this is kind of like your x1 and your x2. Square root of 5 over just h. Now, at first glance, it seems like, oh, okay, well, that's an answer. That seems simplified enough. Maybe we're done. But I want you to, we're not doing limits yet, but I want you to remember back when we saw a problem like this with limits, how did we make it simpler? Because maybe this answer is good enough for now, but in the future it's not going to be. So let's think about, is there any techniques I could do to make this problem, I don't know, could I simplify this answer? Well, can't I use the conjugate method? Can I say this? And what would that give me? Well, that would say, remember the conjugate says you just square the first. Well, the square of a square root is just what's inside, so I have a 5 plus h. Then minus, and the square of square root 5 is just 5. And then on the bottom I'd have h parentheses, because I multiply the top and bottom. That's the conjugate method. So now what would happen? Well, I notice right away I have a 5 and a negative 5, so those cancel out. And then once those cancel out, I have an h on top and an h on bottom. Well, those kind of cancel out so that I just have a 1 on top. Sorry, I missed my. So this whole thing could be written as 1 over square root 5 plus h plus square root 5. Now, the reason why that's a better answer is because if I wanted to take the limit of this thing, which we will do in the future, the limit of h approaches 0, I could evaluate it, and here I could not. So, yes, technically this is an answer for what is the secant slope, but I like this one better. So think about that. I want you thinking in terms of how to use our techniques to simplify limits even now, because it'll just make the future so much easier. Okay, so let's take a look at example 2, very similar problem. It says a secant line intersects the curve y equals 3x squared minus 3x with x coordinates 4 and t, just 4 and t, where t does not equal 5. So that's a typo. That should say t does not equal 4. Just meaning t is just some other value. So again, I want you thinking of this as like x1 and x2, or kind of what we've been saying before, x, and maybe this is like your x plus h. So what's the slope of the line? Well, since we're just using 4 and t and not like x plus h, I'm going to use, instead of using this one, which I told you we're going to use a lot, I'm going to kind of more think of it this way. So let's do that. What is the slope? So first off, let's just say we know the slope fits this basic pattern, right? That's our basic idea of what a slope is. And in this situation, we're plugging in a 4 and a t. So if I was to plug in a 4 and a t, what would I get? I'd get 3 times 4 squared minus 3 times 4 minus, and I'm going to use a big old bracket here because now I'm going to plug in a t. It would be 3 times t squared minus 3 times t. Again, I guess I kind of switched it there. My apologies. I kind of actually treated this like my x1 and this like my x2. And then on bottom, if my x2 is 4, then my x1 would be t. Sweet. Okay, let's just kind of play with this, simplify it, see what we get. All right. So 4 squared is 16, and 3 times 16 I don't know what 3 times 16 is off the top of my head, but I do know that if I double 3, I get 6, and if I half 16, I get 8, so I think that's 48. So I'm just going to go down here. That's a 48 minus 3 times 4 is 12, minus, let's work out what's going on inside here. It would just be 3t squared minus 3t. And on the bottom, I still just have 4 minus t. I'm just going to keep simplifying this. 48 minus 12 is obviously 36. And then I have, if I distribute this negative, I would get negative 3t squared and positive 3t. Again, all over 4 minus t. And now I think this thing is going to simplify even more. Right? I think what I could do is on the top, I could factor a 3 out of everything. But maybe let's just start by writing it in the right order, right? So that would be negative 3t squared plus 3t plus 36. Just want to make sure I haven't made any errors anywhere with a negative sign or anything like that. No, I don't think so. And I noticed something that I might want to do to make my life a little bit easier. Because typically we don't write binomials like this. We usually write the variable first. So 4 minus t, if you think about it, if I factor it out a negative 1, it's the same thing as saying negative 1 times negative 4 plus t. And then you could think of this as negative t minus 4. And that's going to be more useful. So on the bottom, I'm going to write negative parentheses t minus 4. I think you'll see why in a second. Are there any numbers that I could factor out of here? I could definitely factor out a 3. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out a negative 3. So I'll do it down here. If I factor out a negative 3, parentheses, I'd have t squared. I'd have negative t, and I'd have negative 12. Again, all over negative parentheses t minus 4. I think you guys might see what's going to happen here. You have a negative here and a negative here. Those actually cancel out to be positive. Now, there's still more that I could do to simplify this because this trinomial right here can be factored. And I don't know what method you're used to factoring, but typically I use the star method. So what multiplies up to negative 12 and adds up to negative 1? It's going to be 4 and 3, but one of them has to be negative. I'm going to go with negative 4. So now if I rewrite this, I still have a positive 3 on top. I can factor the trinomial to be t minus 4, t plus 3, and on the bottom, I only had a t minus 4. Hey, look, I could cancel those out. And so this does actually simplify to 3 parentheses t plus 3. So that right there is a simplified version of what the slope is between the points 4 and whatever t is. We actually know what the slope is between those 2 points. It's pretty cool. So we've answered the question. We simplified it all down. Now, granted, remember, we got an answer around here for the slope. And yeah, that technically is the slope. But we don't want to leave it in this complicated format if there are algebraic techniques we can use to make it simpler. And so this is a better answer. All right, that's it for 2.1. I'll see you guys in the next video.